How's everybody doing? Welcome to AstroLunaChick's Guide to the Universe. I am Susan, aka AstroLunaChick, here to find out what's going on with the planets and the stars and the asteroids. As always, questioning what the hell is going on in the heavens. And what is up your anus? Thanks for joining me today. How's everybody's Mercury retrograde going? It's not too bad. It's not too bad. I think the typical themes of Mercury retrograde that are so cliche of technology, blah blah blah, missed appointments, miscommunications, um relationship snafus. I've observed all of those things, and I'm gonna go with the relational aspect and reviewing, renegotiating the way we approach relationships, whether it's the relationships that we're in right now or looking at past relationships and sort of distilling whatever the lesson was for us, whatever we learned. We're kind of getting a handle on where we're at based on what we've been through. And I know that Mercury retrogrades are always a time to reflect back on and to renegotiate certain things. Um, Based on who we are. We are a product of our past and our experiences, everything that we've learned, all the relationships that we've had. You know, looking back on the good is just important as looking back on the difficult things and the crash and burn. you know, um, I think everything boils down to our relationships and who we have in our life. And I'm really talking to a lot of people who are kind of at the same point that I'm at with things that we recognize a lot of the patterns, perhaps, that we've been dealing with in relationships and what things have taught us and how we've grown, and things that we might have gotten ourselves into where we may have seen the red flags and continued on anyway because we give people the benefit of the doubt. We hold out hope that things can change, or um, maybe looking at, well, it could really work if they could just XYZ, fill in the blank. Um, I think you get to a certain point in life. It doesn't matter how old you are. It just really matters the experience and the amount of personal growth and accountability that we're willing to take. I think you just get to a certain point where you're like, okay, nope, I know who I am, I know what I want, and I know that I cannot sit around waiting for anyone else to change or show up differently. And in order to have healthier relationships, we can't stay in the same sort of pattern with somebody else who, God bless them, they may be doing the best that they can, but it fits a place where we've already been and we've already kind of gone through it. We can recognize it. Maybe we can help them through. It all depends on someone's level of maturity. If they're willing to work on it, it all depends too. If you have kids, you don't have kids, what are the ties? But I know I'm hearing from a lot of people now that we see where our relationships are holding us back because maybe we're carrying someone else who is not at the same level of maturity, let's say, or we cannot, we're not, we're not equally matched. So it's it's a discordance, it's out of alignment, it's not on the same frequency. However you want to put it, all boils down to relationships, and they are the most important thing in life, really. It's all about who's around you. So I just see a lot of people at a place where um, they've done a lot of work on themselves. Again, these are people who are trying to evolve, trying to be a better version of themselves because they want better in life. And while, we can be compassionate, we can't sit with somebody in their shit because there's certain things that are just not ours to fix and it's holding us back. And now that we see that, I think there's a huge test that comes with this Mercury retrograde. Are we going to slip back into the past patterns? Are we still clinging on to things that are already done that should be wrapped up and packaged up and sent off? So, as I'm recording this right now, the moon is in Gemini, which is the sign that Mercury rules, and it's making a T square, a lovely T square to the sun in Virgo and Neptune in Pisces. So that to me represents a crossroads, a choice point, um, the fulcrum, which would be the moon there, the tipping point, looking at the past, the present, two sides of a situation, being of two minds and not ready to make a decision or make a change. The sun opposite to Neptune is a little foggy. It's hard to see all the details, but we're starting to see them. There is something that the sun is able to shine the light on with the details, the practical cause and effect details from Virgo to illuminate the illusion or what we were not clear about before, things that we hadn't seen before. Several weeks ago, before Mercury went into its shadow and went retrograde on, what was it, the 11th? I'm looking at my chart right now. Anyway, Mercury opposed Neptune. So it kind of gave us a chance to examine things or look at something that was just not clear, that it alerted us to the fact that there were things that we needed to see. So now with the moon squaring it, the emotional component comes in where we feel the crossroads. We feel the decision that needs to be made. And we may not have all the clarity right now to make that decision, but we know that it's coming, or we're deciding on an internal level what we want based on what we're seeing right now, and maybe based on what we know we don't want. Anyway, there is some clarity coming. Uh, right now, as I am recording this, this is the 17th, so this is Saturday. So, Saturday into Sunday, we're reaching a choice point. We're getting some kind of clarity, or we're looking at a situation and we're seeing, wow, I need more clarity. There are things here that I am picking up on that I might not be so clear on the details. So, definitely emotionally, there's a need to kind of pull back, maybe analyze some things. That's the sun in Virgo, weighing out the pros and the cons, and yeah, trying to get that clarity. So, this is a pretty big aspect, and after the moon makes this aspect where we're kind of teetering on something that has come into our awareness over the last 24 hours. Because if we rewind back to yesterday, I'm going to share my screen here. I forgot to do that. I'm working out my Mercury retrograde bugs too. But for me, it's a lot of my technology and the podcast and just kind of trying to get things the way I want them to be. The sound, I'm really kind of obsessing about the quality of the sound and trying not to ramble on and talk too much. Been going too long, definitely too long. All right, so I have the screen shared now, and you can see yesterday there was a big burst of action that kind of popped through some of that sort of stagnancy that we might have been drifting on, but tension and energy building up because we had the Venus in Virgo, which is definitely super picky and particular and perfectionistic when it comes to our personal relationships, our love relationships, our the mental health aspect of our relationships, and square to Mars, knowing that like we need to change. There's even if there was just a sense of restlessness and boredom, this was all building up over the week. So yesterday, the moon, Gemini, and hitting Mars and squaring Venus, it was like, boom, something's got to break and push through. And so I was made of aware of a situation that I did not know that was building with someone else. Who was on the phone with me late last night as they were having a stalking incident. And but this was the tension that was building up all week. And it culminated in just some really stalkerific kind of energy there. And definitely some boundaries were crossed, and somebody needs to make a decision because there's a decision and there's a conversation that needs to, or somebody wants to have. But maybe you've told them you don't want to talk about it anymore. And maybe now, it's time to take things to the next level. But today, there's a little bit of a lull of, okay, which way is this thing going to go with the sun opposite Neptune? It's the unknown. It's really unknown at this point where it's going to go. But thankfully, there's the void, of course, moon, which, for those of you who are not aware, it's basically when the moon makes its last major aspect to a planet before it goes into another sign. We just sort of coast on that energy. So nothing really comes of it whatever the last aspect is the energy that you're just going to kind of sit in until the moon goes into the next sign. So this is today. This is Saturday. So if you're hearing this on Sunday, looking back on Saturday, there might have been big events. There might have been a big decision. There might have been a moment of clarity or lack of clarity, realizing you have lack of clarity about what needs to happen next, and the confrontation and the conversation and the action and the truth. It will be about facing the truth because as we go into September 8th, tomorrow, Saturday, we do have the moon in Cancer. And at that point, Jupiter and Mercury retrograde, both retrograde, are facing off. They're opposing. So you can look at that as two sides of the situation, the conflict, the issue, the conversation, the two choices that you may need to make. On the one hand, it's Jupiter, so it's the truth, and it's in Aries, it's your personal truth, but opposing Mercury in retrograde, it's probably a discussion that's already had or a issue that's already come to light as they're both in retrograde and probably has been building since the retrograde, since a little bit before the retrograde, because Mercury would have opposed Jupiter when it was going direct and then stopped, went retrograde. Now it's back again. So it's an issue, a recurring thing that keeps on popping up. So it really has all to do with whether we can have diplomacy in an issue and honor both sides, both people's perspectives, both people's beliefs, and that's Jupiter, our beliefs and our philosophies, and also our sense of justice. And then Mercury really wanting to balance it and have a conversation, but it's kind of really emotional and awkward and maybe not the right time for some people to confront an issue. I mean, like the situation that I mentioned with the stalker, I said, do not engage, don't confront. If you have to talk, maybe talk over the phone or text, but literally you're just going to have to like probably take it to the next level and now take legal action because the person doesn't seem to be stopping. There's no way. It just doesn't seem to be that other person's going to de-escalate. So tomorrow there's an emotional tipping point with the moon in Cancer and it's squaring off again. So Saturday the moon squares off between the sun and Neptune. There's the known, the practical, the details in Virgo. And then there's the big unknown with Neptune, the kind of scary if you're dealing with someone that has some mental health issues, because there's no rationalizing. I think what the message today is, there's no rationalizing with an irrational person. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to draw the line. And if somebody is, really off balance and not healthy, there's really nothing that you can do to help them at this point. You need to make sure that you're safe and that you have your own peace of mind. So, whatever you need to do, to make that happen. And at this point, for the person that I'm thinking of, they need to take it to the next level because it's not, I don't know where this other person, the other parties, just not getting it. And, I don't want to see them in an unsafe situation. And plus the stress, the stress. I've been through that myself and it put me through hell. And I reached my breaking point and marched right over to a state trooper barracks and said, I'd like to file a report. And I reported harassment. So, that's the other thing I recommended with this person to file harassment charges and, you know, the other party can be arrested. And then if you get the restraining order, because that can take time, they got to be served. So there could be legal issues here. The Mercury and Libra, Libra trying to find justice and balance, and Jupiter rules Sagittarius, which rules law. So, mm, you know, the moon in Cancer on the 18th can be looking at the home and safety and what you need to do to maintain that safety and the emotional balance and peace and what you need to feel safe. So fortunately, the square between Venus and Mars is easing off. Venus is making a trine on the 18th on Sunday to Jupiter. And so Jupiter is the destabilizing aspect right now. And so that could be bringing things a little bit more into stabilization, or knowing, the action that you have to take. You can more easily hash out like the practical details, because Venus and Virgo is about the practical details of changes in relationship. So, you know, Uranus has brought destabilization and change when it comes to our physical, our stability, our resources, our physical body. So this could be, maybe health issues beginning to stabilize, and um, seeing more increase in health, improved health. So the tension that was coming from Mars square to Venus is easing off. And as it does, Venus makes a harmonious aspect to Uranus, which helps us to integrate the changes and deal with the practical details. That's going to help us to integrate those changes. And Mercury, the opposition to Jupiter, that is definitely confronting and having the conversation and making a decision with the moon there. It is all based on weighing the past and the future and the present all in one. And moon in Cancer is going to be emotionally driven. So check in with your emotions and do what it is that you need to do to feel safe. So, whatever's going on this weekend, the emotional quotient is going to be high. Something I want to look at right now. It's called declination. And we use this in addition to looking at where the planets are in the signs and the aspects they make. They also move up and down in declination. just briefly, um, there is an average range. So let's say there is a mean that's called the ecliptic, and then there's the planets move north and south of that. So as you see them go across in the sky, they also move north and south in declination, and there's an average that the planets tend to stay within, but when they go outside of the norm, that's called out of bounds. So the planet tends to act uncharacteristically or over the top, um, out of bounds. That's what it pretty much says. And I'm laughing because when my dad was still alive and my mom was taking care of him, she was a nurse, retired. So she would make little notes about what was going on with him. And I remember her writing that he was OOB, which I looked at it and I said, "Oh, out of bounds. Mom, what the heck is that?" And she said, "Oh, that means out of bed." Now, my dad could hardly walk towards the end and he wasn't very mobile and he needed a lot of help. But there was that sort of transitional period in between being somewhat able ambulatory and not ambulatory where he would escape out of bed and it was not funny, but it was funny where like, oh no, the patient has escaped, he's out of bed. And that's when I was studying and looking at out of bounds planets, and he would do this stuff when the moon was out of bounds. It was just so funny how that all came together at that time because I wasn't using out of bound planets, but I had started looking at that and studying it and watching how the moon, let's say, for instance, was reacting when it was out of bounds, how it was functioning. So it was so funny to see my mother's notes, the nurse's notes. Today, the patient was OOB. Out of bed. Yeah, man, he's out of bounds for sure. So this is an out of bounds weekend. And if you're looking at the graphics on the screen, which you can see if you're looking at this on YouTube, if not, I'll just describe the moon on Saturday and Sunday goes from 27 degrees north to 28 degrees north, which is about as far as I see it. It starts to go out of bounds around 23.5 degrees. And I'm rounding up like I do with the degrees of zodiac. So the moon is out of bed. The patient is out of bed. The lunatics are escaping the asylum. That's what this looks like. So basically what that means is the emotional reaction to everything is amplified. So it's either like way over the top, woohoo, like this is amazing and too good to be true, and not wanting to see the practical side of things. That could be on the 17th with the moon square to Neptune and the sun. There may be things that we're not seeing, or maybe that we don't want to see. But the next day, there's something that we have to see, definitely have to see. And it's the emotion is the key, because our heart and our emotions are where we receive our intuitive messages, or even the gut. And Cancer rules the stomach, the gut feeling, right? Excuse me. And the moon is in Cancer, which it rules. So emotions are going to be running very high on the 18th. The 18th is a 5 day. So if you've been following along, I number the days from 1 to 5 based on the numerology. Take all the numbers of the date and reduce them down. We're in a 6 year. The 17 is an 8. That's 14. That's 5 plus 9, the month makes it a 5 day. So there's imbalance, conflict, some kind of chaos going on. And then we reach the 18th, and that is a 6 where we need to find some kind of balance. And it also tells us where we're at in the particular cycle. We're at the 6, which means 4 more days till we get to the 9, and that thing culminates. So, as far as the retrograde goes, I would say this is one of the most intense days. When we speak about the Mercury retrograde, the effects are not always the same. Not all retrogrades are created equal. They are a product of for one, the sign that Mercury is in, and then two, the aspects that Mercury is making. So at this juncture, I would say when it comes to relationships, when it comes to issues where there are two sides trying to negotiate, look at the strikes and the unions, right? I was just trying to figure out some travel dates for a client, and um, I know what's going on with the unions, like the railroad and the teachers' unions and the nurses. So I remember thinking when I was looking at this over the last couple of days, I thought, what is going on with the airlines? Are we going to hear something about the airlines? So, Jupiter does have to do with long distance travel and foreign countries. And so I did look up there within the last couple of days, there was also stuff going on, not here in the US, but in the UK and France. So in Europe, there are issues. Um, so transportation, that's a thing that gets affected sometimes with Mercury retrograde, not always, but in this circumstance, it has to do with foreign travel, laws, and possibly, well, not really laws, but I could I could see perhaps some kind of laws being changed as a result of what's going on right now. That's a possibility. Now, um, I think that it is definitely transportation. Okay, so long term and larger overarching picture of the future and where things are going, perhaps there will be things that come to light that are issues within that industry, let's say Jupiter, um, regarding foreign travel, air travel. Um, we do have Saturn in Aquarius, 20 degrees of Aquarius, and that's retrograding, and it is um, making a square to Uranus. So that's the push and pull and restrictions. Um, and that can have to do with the airline industry and travel regarding that. But basically, Jupiter having to do with the airlines, whether or not we see a strike during this time in the US, they are seeing it in Europe. So it can be highlighting what can be going on within that industry. For us here in the United States, possibly regulations, Jupiter's laws, but also regulations governing the industry. I think I did see the Secretary of Transportation was sort of leaning on the airline industry to maybe either be clearer about their consumer policies regarding delays and cancellations, and as far as how they compensate customers. That I did see maybe about a week ago. So there are a lot of things coming up regarding transportation. And I know that the news on Friday was that the particular strikes that were looming were averted or ended, and that there were negotiations, tentative agreements, but negotiations are still going on. So I am going to use the strikes as a metaphor for whether it's our personal relationships or it's negotiations between groups, um, whether it's two parties in litigation. This energy is the same across the board. Um, what we have to remember in astrology is that we look at the planets and we see the energy, but there's many different types of ways that these things can pan out. So we have to think metaphorically. We have to be able to overlay, metaphorically speaking, a certain type of situation and be able to apply it many different ways. So that is all very interesting because this is all happening over the weekend. Now, Friday, everyone breathed a sigh of relief to say, ah, chaos averted. But I say nay. I say things are going to change because that's what happens with the retrograde. You think something is set in stone and decided, and it can change. This is a very flip-floppy energy. It is mutable energy to the max. Now, by mutable, I mean the signs have qualities. They are cardinal, which begins, fixed, which stabilizes, and mutable, which is changeable and makes adjustments and tweaks things, perfects things, but that's a changeable energy. So what do we have in mutable signs? We have Mars in Gemini, the actions, the push towards the communication, right? And Venus in Virgo, mutable sign. The details, the relationship, the financials, the quality of life of the workers, the working class that's being discussed here. That's Virgo. Virgo is the working class. Virgo is also a barren sign, what they call a barren sign. It's not recommended to plant in the sign of Virgo, the moon. That's the harvest, right? For us here in the Northern Hemisphere, Virgo, September. We just had the harvest moon, right? That was in Pisces. So we are reaping the harvest of what we've sown since Aries season and going into Libra. This is the culmination, the harvest of all of the energy, all the efforts that we've been putting in. So in essence, there's a lot of changeable energy here. The sun is in Virgo, mutable, and Neptune the veil, the secrecy, the lies, the unknown, the illusion that is trying to be created. Neptune and Pisces, very strong mutable energy. And again, Neptune is retrograde. We have all of the outer planets retrograde right now. Mercury, the only personal planet that is in retrograde, but we have Jupiter, which is in between the personal and the transpersonal. But so Jupiter's retrograde, Mercury's retrograde, okay? Then we got Pluto, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, all in retrograde. So what does that mean? They're very, very powerful. This is a very pivotal time right now that we're going through personally and collectively. It's huge. Like, this is probably one of the most intense retrogrades. And all of the things that we're going through right now have long-term consequences. But they affect everyone. That's my point, is that the outer planets, they move very slowly, so they affect generations. People who are born during specific time periods have specific planets, the outer planets in the same signs. So it affects the larger group of society as a whole. And things tend to come out that we didn't know about. We tend to kind of have a tendency to go towards looking at the past, or things come up for review, all the rewords when we have the retrogrades. So it's a good time to really be careful. It almost feels like an eclipse around the eclipses, when everything is very intense, because it's heavy, it's intense. It's not heavy for everybody, but there is this feeling of like big changes, big changes pending, and not knowing where things are going to go, or maybe not knowing what decisions to make because it's unclear the direction that things are going. So it's a time to gather your information. That's a Mercury retrograde. Always the recommendation is to address the things that are already known, that are already in progress, and just gather your information, watch, listen, and observe what's going on during the retrograde. And then when Mercury goes direct, which it will on October 2nd, then act on the information, act on the situation based on what you have observed, or where you're at that time. Even give it about a week. And this is just for major decisions and starting new things. It just happens to be a little easier because Mercury retrogrades have a tendency to show all of the cracks and the flaws. And we've got a little bit more of that coming up as Mercury goes retrograding back into Virgo. It's really going to have the details under a microscope. So the weekend of 17th, 18th, pretty intense. The moon is out of bounds. Dad is getting out of bed. Call 911. But listen, call for help if you need it. And don't let it escalate if you don't have to. Just try to de-escalate things. So carrying into Monday, we still have a Cancer moon. It's making an inconjunct, which is an uncomfortable aspect to Saturn. which is probably saying emotionally your boundaries have been crossed and um, there's probably a need to do something about it by that point. And if we haven't done anything about it, that's when it could kind of come up where um, there's a need to look at the boundaries or the restrictions. We may feel a little restricted. There's a need to act with integrity and maturity because we're talking about Saturn. And the moon does sextile Venus, which is helping to stabilize things. It is in between, it's making a sextile to Uranus. So there is definitely some changes happening that we're integrating emotionally. Maybe we still feel a little bit restricted or locked in some kind of way, but it's not a bad aspect really to be having, considering um, with the moon making a sextile uh, to Venus. It feels a little bit more like we can handle, perhaps, whatever anxiety. Even though Venus making a trine aspect to Uranus is stabilizing, trines are stabilizing, but it's still activating Uranus, and Uranus is a little bit um, unstable, but maybe it is a better way of managing the changes, managing the unexpected things that we're going through, maybe better managing our finances. With the moon there making the aspect, the sextile to um, both Venus and Uranus, it is sort of a balancing and emotional integration of all of those things that Venus is representing and trying to show us the practical ways that we can maybe have better balance. Oh my God, I have to pause this. This is crazy. Where am I? Where am I? Oh, pause, pause. I got the phone ringing and somebody's car alarm going off. Okay, I'm back. That was weird. That was very weird. Here I am trying to be so careful, trying to be so on point. But my son was calling. He called twice, so um, had to pick that up. Anyway, Monday looks like a little bit more stable, but still emotional. The moon is still out of bounds, so we're still coming off the emotional high. Um, it can still be a little bit chaotic, but there is a need to have a boundary with Saturn probably, the need to draw a boundary for your own emotional stability because the moon here in Cancer is sextiling Venus, and at the apex of that, in conjunct, because Venus is basically in conjunct to Saturn also. The Saturn here is reviewing your obstacles, your boundaries, the need to show integrity and maturity when it comes to our emotions, our emotional and physical safety. So there's a lot going on Monday also. And so by Monday, Mercury is moving off of that exact opposition to Jupiter, but it's still there. It's still within orb. So there's still that ongoing sort of conversation and decision making and truth that we're facing. And the 19th, let's see, the 17th is the 5, 18th is the 6, the 7. So again, it's a bit of a test. We're almost there though. There is a test of our maturity, our stability, our ways of practically being practical about integrating the abrupt changes that are happening or changes that we need to make, really. And we are moving into Monday, the 20th. So now we're at the 8, almost to the 9. We're almost there. So on the 20th, we've got, I'm going to rewind a couple of hours because the moon does make an opposition to Pluto, which will be intense. And the sun is making a trine to Pluto. So let's see. It's earlier in the day on the 20th, on Tuesday, where the moon has to oppose Pluto at 27 degrees of Cancer. Pluto's at 27 degrees of Capricorn and making a trine, both of them. Well, sorry. The sun is making a trine to Pluto, which is really showing us the details and highlighting the power struggle, the manipulation, the fear tactics that can happen with the moon opposing Pluto. I mean, there's a, a lot of tension and some high anxiety that'll go along with this. So moon is still out of bounds, and this is involving the emotions, mental health. Pluto wants to transform the situation, but it may be a difficult process, or we may be processing difficult emotions. The moon in Cancer is very strong emotionally, and out of bounds can be, really uncharacteristic, out of character, the way someone's emotionally reacting to something. But, there's a breaking point coming here. Like there's only so much that that you can take. There's a lot of stress, and just doing what you need to do for yourself, for your own health, for your mental health. So as far as the conversation goes, it's getting closer to a confrontation or a breaking point. So if we're talking about the union stuff, I really do think that it does not really look like they're reaching. I know they're negotiating and they have a tentative settlement, but it kind of looks like it really doesn't favor, let's say, the workers. Um, and we may see the exposure of manipulations that have been going on behind the scenes. We might see some kind of like a whistleblower type stuff going on as the moon wanes and moves into Mercury later in the week, in the middle of the week. But um, I see kind of a reversal on a situation. So, I mean, this could be a situation where someone who is backed into a corner and feeling powerless suddenly, has to stand up for themselves, have to bring justice to a situation, needs to speak about it, to communicate what's going on, to ask for help, or to find the deep strength within themselves to put a stop to a situation, you know, that can happen with this moon opposing Pluto. There's a lot of pressure there. There's a control. There's there are things coming out that were hidden that need to come out, information, things that we need to see about a situation or about, let's say, the conditions, working conditions, the industries that are striking, relationships in general, the relational dynamic, and sometimes that plays out in the public with celebrities because they are a representation of what a particular archetype that is existing within our collective. So we kind of get to work through some stuff by observing the situations with people who are in the public eye. Um, there can be a lot that comes up with politicians, public servants, groups of people that are underserved populations, underprivileged, working class, immigration. We know what's going on with the shuffling around of particular groups of people, which is terrible that those people are being used as political, pawns in a political game. And it is highlighting a lot of what is going on right now within our culture of the hypocrisy, let's say, of certain groups of people who say that they care and but yet when it's on your doorstep. So there's all these different perspectives that are playing out, not one right over the other, but we're seeing the flaws, we're seeing the cracks. We're seeing the cracks in the system. Anyway, so that's Tuesday. That's the 20th, and that's an 8 day. So we're almost at the culmination. But this is the way we started out. We started out with this power struggle. So whether it's this tapping into your deep reserves of strength to get you over and out of whatever situation that you are facing during this week, we can find the strength within ourselves to keep going and the faith, the faith that there is help, there's assistance. Virgo is the sign that is about service and about helping other people. Um, but it's hard to get help if nobody knows what you're going through. And that is a little bit playing into this Mercury retrograde too of communication and asking for help and handling situations. Everything hinges on communication right now. The actions, the strategies, the details, the communication that is going on. So, moving on to Wednesday. Wednesday, we have the moon in Leo. The moon is making a positive aspect when it moves into Leo, probably overnight or late Tuesday into Wednesday, which looks like there is some kind of resolution. It makes positive aspect to um, Mercury retrograde. So that looks like there's some sort of headway in the conversation. And that actually looks like evening, later in the day, evening, overnight on the 20th into the 21st. So there does seem to be some sort of improvement. The moon will make um, a positive aspect to Jupiter after that. There is some kind of relief coming, and that happens overnight, early in the morning on the 21st, Wednesday. So this is the 9 day, right? Yeah, this is the 9. This is the end. So, you know, if you haven't taken action, this might be the day that you do it. Maybe you feel like you can do it because maybe you didn't feel like you could do it before or have that conversation. This feels a little bit more positive. There's supportive energy from Moon in Leo, the aspect to Jupiter, positive aspects trying to Jupiter, sextiling to Mercury indicates that even though this is happening late at night, there is the possibility of a more productive conversation happening. People may be more willing to negotiate. And that's the 9. That's the 9 day. So here we are. Just going to pause at this moment to I'm going to end this segment and then start re-recording.